you over at Amfactor for the past 6 months. So let's hop right in. This is going to be about a CRO, which is represented by my buddy, Matt Cameron. He's trained. Matt, how many salespeople do you think you've trained?
I don't know, a lot. And more importantly, perhaps the managers who went on to train them.
Right. So Matt specializes in training managers that trains the rest of the sales org. And I went through Matt's boot camps and courses. Absolutely love them. Transformed my career and life. So I've learned a lot from Matt. He's representing the CRO persona today. And also Justin Gray. Justin, you've been on the success side of the partner-vendor relationship for years and years, and you've literally overseen thousands of service delivered and software implementations. So Justin, you'll be representing our Chief Customer Officer. Thanks so much, Justin, for coming.
Sounds great.
Awesome. And then we got Blake Williams here, who's sitting at the intersect of all things partner and marketing. So representing our CMO persona of the day. And the way that I wanted to kick off this panel, fellas, and I'll be kind of moonlighting, if you will, as the either skeptical executive or partner pilled executive, kind of going back and forth between both of those, tangentially representing the partner persona. Where I wanted to kind of start things off with is not where everything's great and working well, but for the partner ecosystem professionals that are here today, what might be the one thing that's standing in the way of starting that relationship, like maybe building some empathy for the other persona? So Matt, let's start with you as a sales leader, and the CEO started to say, hey, we need to figure out this partnerships thing. Partnership person hears that and goes, hey, Matt, CEO said, let's figure out this partner thing. And you're immediately like, oh God, another thing I have to do, right? Another thing I have to figure out. What's going to be the thing that most stands in the way, or some advice on like what not to do? Let's start maybe there.
I'll start with some context first. I think that it depends on the nature of the partnerships and the reason why you're looking to establish partnerships, right? Be it product gap, technical relationships, service delivery capability, post-sale support, or a revenue partnership. So I'm going to answer that question from the perspective of a more of a co-sell or some sort of revenue partnership where the partners, because I've seen this so many times, mainly mid-market enterprise, where the partners have the capability to sell and service their own deals. So the biggest issue is figuring out how to carve up the pie so that you don't have channel conflict. So the most obvious one, of course, is thinking about to whom each party can sell, and there will inevitably be overlap, and sometimes it's intentional. And the number one mistake I see is comp misalignment. So we want to make sure that a direct sales organization is absolutely agnostic as to whether they source and close a deal themselves, or they work with a partner organization to get it done. And if you don't sort that out in the comp, then the behavior will follow. And the
so
reps
Matt,
won't.
Following on that, then I'll toss it to the other folks, is the assumption that partners are ready to sell and service. I think for most SaaS companies, that's not the case, right? It has to be a co-sell and it has to be a co-delivery because of, let's say, the startup phase, right? A few hundred employees or even 1,000. If the assumption from the sales leaders past, right, they've been in a position where they've been in a channel organization where partners are capable, but now that we're in a new situation where partners really aren't capable, how do we get them from like, hey, you've experienced channel sales at Salesforce or Adobe or some big IT channel infrastructure thing, but now we're in SaaS, these partners aren't capable of selling by themselves or servicing by themselves?
Well, I don't think it's even as simple as that. Some of them are. Some of them aren't. So I think, first principles, again, I think we tend to be too broad brushed with this stuff. Like it's so nuanced. You stand up a channel program, you can have some established partners who can do it all, right? They've been out there with other service offerings and they're adding you to the mix. And to your very valid point, there'll be other smaller organizations who are actually, partnering with you. Maybe you're the first vendor organization they're partnering with. So I think you've got to accommodate both, and you need to think about both contexts and decide where you're going to go. And some organizations are going to say, we're going to only work with a company that's full service, from sourcing to delivery. Others will say, no, we just want a co-sell motion and we're going to look after the customers and vice versa. There's a lot to it. I don't think you can give one answer to it, Jared. I think that just because we're in SaaS, I think there's a spectrum. Yeah.
Right.
I saw Blake nodding. What do you, I'd love to know. Am I on the money?
Well, I'm going to come through sales success, then back to marketing.
All right. Take the lead. All right.
Justin, from your perspective, if you're sitting in the VP of CS or Chief Customer Officer position and you hear the CEO say, hey, guys, figure out this partnering thing. Like we're cutting everywhere, so maybe we can save some costs. What is something that a partner person needs to know about coming and approaching their CCO with that sentiment, but not necessarily that buy-in?
Yeah, I think there's two really predominant pillars. The first and foremost is incentive, right? So I think a lot of CS teams or success teams have a perverse incentive internally to funnel oftentimes to an internal consulting division or an internal staff that actually competes with the focus of a lot of those partners, whether it be from an integration standpoint or from a success standpoint. So that's an area that has to be well thought out and oftentimes overcome. The other aspect I would say is actually can reside more on the partner, but still is a main challenge, and that's education. So how do we fully understand how our partner ecosystem comes together, what the benefits of each partnership type or partner, and what do they bring? And the reason why I say that oftentimes falls on the partner or as a shortcoming of the partner is because everyone wants to get on call and say we can do everything, and those folks are hearing that exact same narrative from every partner that hops into one of those lunch and learns or educational sessions. And although you might have a wide array of services servicing multiple verticals and ICPs, you've got to narrow that down. It's got to be pain point based, use case based, and hopefully aligned to the things that those folks are hearing from a day-to-day basis. Like I often say, like CS teams hear all of the pain from the client and often can't solve any of it. They're looking for how do I better use this platform, or I need help extending a solution, and it's not their job to provide those services. So it really is their job to be a conduit into those different solution sets, and we've got to arm them to do that effectively.
Right. Blake, let's kick it over. Kick it over to you. Kind of like it seems like alignment with the organization's comps and metrics seems top of mind for the sales and success side. I have a feeling to some degree that it might not be the same on the marketing side, because it's like you talking about partner marketing, driving demand for partners with partners. You talking about co-marketing. Like, how do we approach the CMO where the CEO said, "Hey, let's figure out this partner thing. What's going to be what are the things that the CMO is worried about to start thinking of, from that partner persona's point of view?"
Give me two shots at that question. The first one is like the very beginning part. First thing, CEO, is why, right? Where are we feeling pain in our flywheel that needs to be addressed, or that you think partnerships can address, right? Because without pain, people are going to abandon what it really takes, which is commitment, discipline, and consistency to launch that entire partnership program and get it off the ground.
Okay, so let's pause here then. So maybe we're coming to something, because each of you said something here. The CEO said, "Hey, let's figure out this partner thing." That's not enough to come from the CEO. Like if the partner person, you're like, "Hey, I won." CEO saying, "Let's figure out this partner thing." No, let's really codify the why across each of these departments.
Right. And if that is presenting itself inside of its flywheel as the largest point of friction, then you immediately have another executive leader who is now mutually interested in seeing this thing also be successful, so that they can come off of the bottom as the lowest value add. But to Matt's point, right, Justin, you're talking about that's painstorming. I'll take that from Rob Sale that I was speaking with earlier today. I wish I could say that, but find out every leader's individual pain, and then find out their opportunity. So what if I fix that pain? What's that equal, right, for you, right? And so now you can stack rank these things. And once you have a stack rank, we can do what Matt said and say, okay, where do these incentives need to lie, so that we can start to shift behavior, so that we are start to all rowing in the same direction towards fixing this long-term strategy. Right. And doing the everyday behaviors that will lead to the outcomes that the business needs to start spinning faster.
Can I dive in for a second? I want to leak, because I think between Blake and Justin, it's a really interesting point here. Again, looking at it from the service and delivery side of it rather than the revenue side of it. One of the things that we haven't mentioned, I think is worth pointing out, is that I've seen too many situations where we've been too quickly to sign on partners. And to your point about them being able to do everything, who ends up fixing bad implementations? Right. We do. The vendor does, right? So it doesn't matter who had their brand on the front of it, right? If a partner screws up an implementation, then Justin's group, or the CS group, needs to fix it. And so as we're thinking about this, I think it's really, really important that we have a very strong and rigorous partner certification program as part of one of the things you absolutely have to do when you get going. And an example of that is that you never do your first few implementations alone. You always have expert services from our side to make sure, yep, this is going to be okay. Last thing we need is brand equity dilution and churn through bad implementations from partners.
Right. And if I can pick it up from there now, I'll give you the CMO answer. It's like, hey, I'm interested in delivering partner influenced revenue or marketing influenced revenue, marketing sourced revenue. At the end of the day, I'm making sure that our brand is protected, right? And that we are building and living in market with our communities, with our customers. Again, pain storm, gain storm. How, partner, are you going to help me meet those goals, right? And insofar as you can show me the light, what I would recommend any partner leader out there is that when you're trying to bring a partnership that you think should be co-marketed and co-sold with or integrated with, you find out what their demand gen statistics look like. What's their lead to opportunity close rate? I mean, come in with some real pipeline funnel metrics to say, hey, CMO, you need to pay attention to this because here we are, they're going to give us lift, right? And so both of us marketing together now make more than what we already have on our own. Right. And so that dollar goes significantly further. And that's a good way to get somebody's attention because you just made my life easier.
So I think one key theme to accomplishing all of those aspects that we all just talked about is, partner alignment much earlier than most organizations are thinking about that alignment today. Because quite frankly, like Matt said, something like who fixes a failed implementation? Well, who gets the implementation to start off with? It's normally the partner that sourced that deal. Right? We'd all be pretty upset if someone else is taking our deal, but that's often the first real time that partner is being evaluated. All right, now they gave us something that we want, which is sourced revenue, right? And naturally, they're going to want to do the implementation, but everyone's trying to figure that out within the context of that deal and that client. Like that needs to be aligned on much earlier in that process. Goes to co-marketing, goes to co-selling, and then obviously implementation and support down the road. So often that partner alignment or the relationship with the partners is predicated on who's going to give me a logo. And that, frankly, I think just exacerbates all the natural issues that come up within a partnership.
100%. I want to go a little bit deeper into the roles that each of you would have in this theoretical world. This is all that you're focused on. I know each of you are multidisciplinary now. Let's start with Matt. Let's kick it backwards from Blake. Blake, what are some things, kind of expanding on your point, like understand your other department's metrics? I had these 7 pleas to the ecosystem in 2023, and my final one was to partner professionals. And I said, my plea to you is to help marketing do marketing together, help selling do selling together, help the services team do servicing together.
Yeah.
So what might someone that's in a partner position not understand about the day in the life, the metrics, the demands, the stress of being a CMO? How do they better empathize and understand that business to come alongside and help them hit their numbers by virtue of marketing together?
Right. It's if we're being honest, marketing is only really one rung above partnerships on its way to the island, right? And then somewhere sales is on the front end of that ladder. In terms of being funded and being able to dictate what happens in terms of growth. I would say across a majority of companies, that's kind of how it is. So in a way, what they need to understand is that marketing does have some budget allocation capability, but at the end of the day, they're subject to a CRO. And at the other end of the subject, they have their dotted line. You can say they're not, but if that EVP of sales has an issue, the CMO is going to have a short shelf life. Right? Especially if it comes down to pipeline. So at the end of the day, all the demand and engagement that you can create is fantastic unless it's actually translating to dollars. And finding out maybe the top 3 things that lead in that funnel or in that flywheel or whatever they're in that pipeline that lead to those sales qualified opportunities the most from a marketing perspective will be key for you to pull out.
The biggest problem I've seen when starting these conversations is that I've encountered marketing people for the first time when I'm like, hey, let's do marketing together. You have this extreme, like maybe a Dave Gerhardt who I did stuff with. Dave didn't care. Dave was just like, screw the spreadsheets, like throw it in our ROI. Like he could care less about ROI. But then you get the more tactical demand gen marketers and they're going, wait a second, what's partner, pipeline and then what's marketing pipeline? I'm like, if you ask that question, we're already lost. Like, can I give you 100% of what we would call partner and just put it in your bucket? Like that feels like if you're having that debate on like what came from partners and what came from marketing, you're only going to lose.
Yeah, that's a culture problem, man. At the end of the
Right.
day, that CEO should be dictating or at least putting out that, hey, we all win as long as we all win together, right? As long as everybody's helping each other win, and you're circling the wagons around these growth opportunities. Let's go make some money first, and then we'll figure out how we compensate everybody for it. But until then, everybody gets compensated, right?
Right. It's
Because
like,
there's
let's push all the partner stuff into the marketing bucket in terms of pipe generation, right? It's there. It's like,
right.
don't worry about that.
Yes.
Justin, let's go to you from the CCO's perspective. What might be something they're skeptical about, or like the wrong way to approach that? The job to be done for the CCO, like the pressures that they're under. Churn's probably right now, at levels that it's not necessarily comfortable. The CRO is all of a sudden the CRO that didn't necessarily care about the install base is now obsessed over the install base. Let's sell into the install base. So you're being pressured to sell more into your thing. You're pressured to make sure they don't churn. And then now CEO comes to you and says, hey, let's figure out this partner thing. How can a partner person understand the job that you have better to start that relationship and figure out how partners co-deliver?
Well, I think, most good partner people are operating, in that world, that headspace at a really granular and all-encompassing level. You have to understand the CCO or the success area of a business doesn't have that context. They don't trust those partners. They don't know what they can do. And rightfully, I think most CCOs covet the relationship that they have with their customers above all other things. So
Right.
where I've seen a lot of friction and challenges, pressure from the partner team, hey, we should involve A, B, and C within this client use case, or identify this pain point, they can really help us out. But all of that life cycle hasn't taken place within the success org at that point. They don't really understand why so and so adds value. They don't have the relationship there. They don't have the connective tissue within those teams. And that's something that we have to foster at the very beginning of those conversations, again, across that entire partner landscape. But you have to really at a deep level understand that those individual partners, what they bring to the table, form connections there that, again, aren't just transactionally focused. We have to do that before we've got that big problem in front of us, or that churn issue arising, or whatever it happens to be.
So where would be the best place to start then? Like, how do I broach that conversation? Is that around, hey, CCO or VP of CS? Like, do I need to be finding, hey, here's this partner that's already working with a joint customer, and ensure that I have some success stories? Like, here's two partners that have done these things for these customers. How do we inculcate that across other CSMs? Or here's how these partners got proficient in the product and drove customer value. How do we scale that across our professional services? What is the thing that I should be doing to make sure that I have some trust coming into that conversation with my success leader?
Yeah, I think those kind of use-based, case studies, understanding of client successes, those are key, and they're kind of table stakes, right? But at the end of the day, like, we've got to get these teams helping one another. And I think that's where partners can really kind of step up and bring some value to the table in understanding, what is that low friction or low cost offering that can immediately solve some of the pains that are happening within that CS team. I'll give an example. Like, in an environment that I've been super ingrained in for over a decade, marketing automation, right? Like, there's your average CS rep is managing too many clients. They're being asked to run these kind of health check motions to get an understanding of where a client's at from a maturity standpoint, and largely their purview is predominantly technical. Services partners can come into that and widen that aperture quite a bit. And I think the partners that were successful there were providing those value add offerings to form relationships with the individual CS managers and even the teams below them, and align those individuals with folks on their team, and provide that value up front. Here's how I can make a job that you're resource strapped in order to do easier, provide value to the client, and then there's a natural kind of runway that establishes post that. But I always say there's kind of some table stakes things that you just need to do from an alignment standpoint at that kind of executive level, but the real work happens on the ground level. So if you can provide some value there as a CS leader, if you can open up that opportunity, I think there is a huge amount of potential there.
Okay, so Matt, coming back to you, let's assume we're not talking about the more tactical, like comp and alignment things, like I'd love to be in a position every time where I'm talking with a sales leader about something like partner attach rate and having some clear alignment around partner attach rate. I referenced earlier that one of my favorite stories was about a Boston-based company named Acquia, and their former CRO and their former CCO both told me, hey, everything changed whenever the comp plans said 50% partner attach rate or you don't make President's Club. All of a sudden, reps were much more willing to, do co-selling. But beyond that, what's the context that's missing for that partner person who's never been a VP of sales or CRO? Like, what is that CRO going through right now that might make them more willing or less willing to, okay, how do we figure out this partner thing?
Yeah. So again, I think in the context of technical and service delivery capability, I think is really comes into play. Everyone's going to take free pipeline, right? So I don't think that's going to be a challenge. What is going to be a challenge from a sales side is, one of the things I'm always concerned about is, will you slow down my deals?
Yes.
Right. I bring a partner and they're going to slow things down. There's a lot of resistance, especially from reps, right? And so how do we get around that? Well, what we need to do is look at verticals and ICPs where the A+1 strategy is critical to win, right? We're all competing. I mean, Justin has a marketing automation background, but can we partner with somebody that has vertical industry expertise that gives us plus something else that's going to differentiate us in a way that's going to increase our win rate and potentially our deal size? The specific example from my background and experience would be early days at Salesforce. We were a horizontal platform. And arguably not even a platform, and we wanted to get into financial services. There's no way in hell we could have done it by ourselves, and these enterprise reps needed to break into it to get those big deals. And the first deal we did was with Merrill Lynch, with a service provider called O'Kerry, who had deep vertical industry expertise. And because of that partnership, we won a deal we had no right to win, right, against Oracle and /Siebel. So, convince me that the extension and deal cycle is completely offset by increase in deal size and win rate, then we're going to be in a good situation. So I think it's really. Go on.
Oh, I was just saying, you hit the nail right on the head. Like, I think you codified that really clearly. There's these three vectors: deal size, win rate, deal velocity. And if there's a trade-off on one, there better be an accretive component to two others, right? It's kind of like, do you want it fast, cheaper, well done? Pick two. Right? It's kind of like, look, you're not going to have all three in any best case scenario CRO, but I think you would take extended deal cycle if you could improve an increase in ASP and a significant improvement in win rate.
Well, what about for most of our audience is probably in early stage or growth stage of their company? You go and try and sell to JP Morgan Chase when you're a Series B company with 30 million of funding. Very hard. But if Accenture walks you in the door, right, you've got a shot at it. So I think people are pretty short-sighted about the value of partners in that respect. They can really take you into the enterprise space if you do it right. The biggest challenge you're going to have is how you convince Accenture and the likes of them that you have a meaningful contribution to make to their practice, right? And then actually the argument is the same on the reverse. We're going to give you access to deals that you wouldn't otherwise get into for your main service lines and offerings through leveraging what we have. But
expanding on that a little bit more, Matt, and then we can kind of get Blake and your Justin, your opinions on this. What I really liked what you were saying is, look, maybe it's not about boiling the ocean and saying partners are the panacea for everything, especially right now. Like, what can we go do? And I think that verticalization, I learned so much by going from SMB high velocity SaaS startups to enterprise startups, and then like co-selling with Adobe. All of a sudden, it's like, this is a different ball game. Like this named account manager does not get out of bed for less than $1 million deal. She could care less about my $50,000 deal, much less my $250,000 deal. She just won't care. Now, if I create a vertical approach to this, however, where, hey, she sells into financial services, I have these three accounts, and I'm not trying to go deep and make her co-sell on all three. I'm just sharing and trying to articulate, and then, oh, there's a service provider that is also in that financial services. So I think you need to have some sort of verticalization or geo, some segmentation strategy to really nail with your CRO first. And that also seems like it would have downstream effects into the service line and into the marketing side. It makes everything a little bit more tight. So maybe a more verticalized or segmented approach versus everything is the best way to tackle this.
I think so, but then I love the other guys to dive in here, because I'm sure there's some horror stories where the sales side of the organization tears off and we start selling these new accounts, and then on the back end, the post-sales, we just don't have the vertical industry competency. We don't have the glossary of terms to actually service those accounts, right? If you go into institutional banking, there's a lot of complexity to that. And then how does the average CS person deliver against that, right? Because they don't understand the use cases. So we have to be aligned. And then, we have to have product marketing, collateral, white papers, and all the support that goes around that vertical as well. So we can't just go and add the equivalent of an OCarry financial services partnership without thinking through all of this.
Right. And Blake's just casually dropping in the chats that he's launching a podcast next month. So whatever, Blake.
Yeah. It's called Earn It, folks.
Plugs are great everywhere. I love plugs. So I will be subscribing to that, by the way. So that's not me talking trash.
We're like 15 shows deep, and I'm having you on there.
Okay.
So, yes. So one of the things that you guys just hit on from a marketing perspective, especially if you're trying to sell again, if we're thinking about Crossbeam, that top left corner of overlapping accounts where there's real opportunity. I call that the in the money opportunities, right? If we're going to look at those, we're going to go through and segment them first by vertical after we get past the NPS and after we get past the number of relationships in the buyer, the economic buyer group. We're going to be verticalizing, right? Because if we're going to productize that minimum viable, better together story, then it can't be about something that services everybody. Because when we start that outbound motion, when we start running ads, we have to be super crisp and clear about how we're going to make that customer's life better with both of these things. So there's I think that's the key 100%. And to the extent that your list is off and that you're non-verticalized, your marketing budget is going to be wasted. Right. Because you can't be everything to everybody.
Unless maybe events and you can find a category evangelist thing, but that really does take a lot of market movement and there's a rising tide and there's some developing community that might be later stage. If you can, great. I'd say events might be the only counter I'd put to that, Blake, because you can bring 5, 6, 10 partners together and kind of share in that. That's the hack. But I think you're spot on.
Justin, there's only room for one podcast announcement, by the way, guys. So let's tone it down. Go ahead, Justin.
What do I have to add to that? Honestly, I don't know that I have anything additional that vertical, I guess either verticalization or use cases that span different verticals. Everyone right now is looking for results. They're looking for hyper value. They're looking for, for a demonstration that not only you've got expertise in that area, but that you've driven those results. And so I think how we think about categorizing customers, what that customer's unique pain was, what they were looking to accomplish, and how we delivered across that, and then slicing that up with intelligent segmentation, again, it makes all the sense in the world.
Right. It seems to me like, anecdotally, the thing that was the hardest to figure out was whenever you had partner interest from all parties, but then you had a partner, the engagement fell on its face, right? And what I mean by that is the AE screwed it up for the partner, or the partner screwed it up for the AE. That's broke. In that at bat, I no longer have that AE and I no longer have that partner. So being able to have a higher hit rate, I think is very important this year. It's not hey, let's bring partners into everything. It's no, you better have your stuff lined out to where if I'm taking this partner to marketing, we're going to crush the execution, the brand, we're going to nail this to create more downstream effects. If I'm going to bring an account in with a seller, I'm bringing a good seller that's committed to maybe a verticalization or use case thing, right? That's hey, I've done this before. Okay, start there. Right. And then on the success side, don't start with the CSM that's 1 month in the job. That's hey, I need a partner to help that could screw up that relationship, or vice versa. Someone that's yeah, I've done co-delivery and I understand what it's like to work with a partner in an account. And oh yeah, I want to replicate this again and again. I think there is something to be said around that. Is a big takeaway from today's panel. I don't know, any other questions from people coming in? I know we're at 1 minute. We're about to transition out. I learned a ton. Leave us some emoji love. Shoot some stuff in the comments if you felt so. These are 3 of my favorite people from marketing, sales, and success in the entire world. I'm so happy you guys could join us. Thank you so much for coming to the partner kickoff event that none of us had out there in the world.
You got it. It's super fun. Yeah, great to see you guys.
Absolutely. Take us home, Alex.